All right, welcome back to another episode of Raise Them Up. Here we are in season 7, chapter 4 of this book, written on their hearts by Chris and Melissa Swain. And today is all about connection. I mean, that's kind of the word I'm taking away from this as well. The chapter's called Some Days Never Come, Connect with Them. Yes. Connect with them. And so the whole idea, right, is, I mean, this principle that you only have, it's similar to what we've seen in past books, past seasons, things like this, in the whole, like, you keep telling yourself you're going to connect with your kid someday, and some days never come, right? And so this idea, this high encouragement, and I do love how Chris and Melissa paint this picture of what connection actually looks like, and he kind of starts us out by just really looking at Jesus too. But I also love the little preface that he gave to us in the sense of when we get into this topic of connection, just because you're sharing an experience, it doesn't mean you're connecting with your kid.
So true. So true. I think a lot of times we fall into that trap of like, I want to give my kid this experience and that will be meaningful for them.
Yeah.
No, the meaning doesn't just automatically happen, and connection doesn't just automatically happen because you're doing something cool. It's an investment thing, and it's an intentionality thing. That's another word we come back to all the time, intentionality.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, the illustration that Chris gives us as he starts is with his son sledding. I was going to say snowboarding. sledding with some makeshift cement mixing tub. And saying like that was one of his like favorite memories, but the truth of the matter is his son doesn't remember. His son had a whole lot of fun, but it was a shared experience. It wasn't a connection thing, right?
And for Dad, it was. Dad felt like they were connecting. I think sometimes we have to be careful that when I feel like we're connecting, my child may not feel the same exact thing. We're looking at it from two completely different perspectives, right? I mean, my 15-year-old and myself, we're looking at things completely differently. So maybe we did connect for me, but not for them.
Yeah, and especially when it's one of those shared experience things. You know, we were in the same space for a while, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing is, I can imagine like a great scenario would be like a road trip, okay? Well, just because you drove on the road for 8 hours doesn't mean you connected, right? You can share the same physical space over a long period of time. You could be witnessing the same thing, right? And it's kind of funny because honestly, when I was reading as he kind of described that, I thought about church, right? Just because you're sitting in the pew hearing the same thing doesn't mean you're connecting to the people next to you, right? That's a whole different thing to actually take it to a whole different level. So I really appreciated that. But pretty quickly after these warnings, he gets us into this whole look at how Jesus built connection thing. And the big thing that he shares is that connection comes through care, right? Care of people. We certainly see this in Jesus's ministry. I don't know how much stood out to you guys from those pages, but Jesus takes that time to slow down, right? Certainly a message that we've already seen in this conversation we've been having over Write It on Their Hearts. And so to slow it down, to actually spend some time with people. And then, of course, he's brilliant with his little acronyms because we had time, right? Yeah. Yeah, and now we have CARE, C.A.R.E, as he breaks it down into to actually connect and to care. You have compassion, authenticity, relevance, and engagement. Yeah.
And I think about how do you take a moment and turn it into a connecting point? I think for one of the things that I've learned in dealing with my kids from foster care is that you need to review it. And that's, a bit of that engagement piece, but just that like saying it out loud, acknowledging what it is, and then like repeating and coming back to it. So as much as like this cool sledding experience, if he doesn't say to his son and look him in the eye and say like, this was such a cool day. I'm so glad I got to do this with you. And then later hearken back to it. It's one of those things where, again, if you don't point to it, if you don't cause the engagement or pause to recognize it with your child, then it might just totally go over their heads.
I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, the idea of the saying it out loud, if it's meaningful, say it. This was so meaningful. This was so important to me, and the hearkening back, like that's a great layer to bring into the conversation. Yeah.
And being careful. I love when he's talking about that we sometimes connect with the moment, right, and we don't connect with our child.
Yeah,
This was great that we were
glad we had fun
right here, but I'm not connecting with you.
Yeah.
And so making sure that you're talking and engaging your child and making it relevant to, you know, I'm glad we got to spend this time together. It was fun to.
I loved watching you smile as we went down that hill, and you know, I love hearing you laugh. Like making it personal is a big deal.
It's so interesting as we were recording this, coming off of basketball season. Like I'm hearing these conversations and going, "Oh, that's a different approach I can even take into that situation." So for our listeners that are working with young people in a different way too, like, okay, yeah, we had cool wins. Right. And we both shared those and experienced those. But
Scoreboard
as far as
isn't
connecting to the individual players, like even the after the game stuff, like, and I felt like I did a decent job of sharing specific like wins and saying like, dude, seeing you do that, that was awesome. But even in the heat of the moment of the game, because we're coming off that state tournament.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that first game was so exciting because we came back from like what felt like a super deep gap to lose by 1 point. But like it was still like, and we were ahead. We were down by what felt like a lot. They pushed through, they persevered. There was some really great, anytime you get ahead and there's a change in the game that you call a timeout and like the whole gym is cheering, like that kind of stuff. I got really hyped. But to be able to harken back to that and in those moments, appreciate the players, appreciate the students. And the same thing's true when you have one of those sledding moments, like just calling it out loud right then and making a connection and not just assuming, right? I think so often in just human relationships, we assume
people feel that way. What we
feeling. Yeah. And that can go either extreme, right? Can assume it's really awkward, can assume someone's judging me, can assume like this is happening, can assume they had a great time. But the truth of the matter is we don't always know what our kids are walking in with.
Right.
So what they started with, so just because we have the shared experience there, we brought something else into this, you know, too. Yeah. Right. What a great conversation.
I think from an educated perspective, you know, even that plays out in the classroom when you talk about connecting with your students.
Good, yeah.
Absolutely.
In student ministry, right? I'm thinking of work camp, right? We spent a lot of time in the van together on that drive. We then had this shared experience of work camp, even though most of us were in different, you know, groups and stuff.
Yeah.
But yet, if you talk to our students on the way back or after reflecting, there were moments of connection that happened organically outside of what we may think as moments of we would connect, right? And so it's like, oh, we went and, you know, we saw the sunrise. That might be a connection. Or in my case, there was a group of girls that drew this imaginary rescue home from a mountain, and that was their connection piece. And they still talk about it today when we, you know, gather. And so I think sometimes as parents, we're looking for these connections without realizing that giving them that freedom to organically find those connecting moments than forcing it. Because I think in our desire to connect, we may be missing the connection that's there.
It's like when you set your sights on something like we're going to Disneyland and we're gonna have fun, you know.
Right, exactly.
You're pushing and you're missing them having you know, a lollipop in the backseat of the car. You know, you're missing the little bits that matter more to them because you're setting your own expectations. So it's an expectation piece.
Absolutely.
But I find myself very guilty of that sometimes. Like I'm working really hard in the kitchen to make a nice meal that I want us to connect with later. And you're telling me there's a kitty across the street. Okay, fine. I'm going to go look at the kitty with you.
Right.
But then, you know, like that's what they're more excited about. And, you know, my kids are little. So I've been having to kind of follow their lead rather than set my own expectations for a connecting moment. And it's been really freeing.
Right.
Because a lot of times I think I'm going to have to put in a whole lot of work and a whole lot of effort to build connecting opportunities, when in reality, I just need to pause and observe.
Sure.
Absolutely.
And it's a lot easier to attain than I originally thought.
Yeah. Right. And I'm thinking as y'all are talking, because work camp, like the parallel parents can draw from this is like the great thing of work camp is it's great and it's also draining. You're spending every
moment,
waking moment with these students, right? Now, thankfully during the day you are in different groups and you get a little bit of a break. So it's very, very parallel to a parent experience. It could be. And in many ways though, like the cool parts about work camp are not the big planned things for years in advance. But again, those little moments. And I think that parallels and it parallels to what you were saying too, Melanie, and that yes, you do need to create those connection opportunities, but your creations don't have to be elaborate.
No.
They don't have to be big, drawn out, planned things. It can just be embracing the heat of the moment. Because like I think of just walking to an event and having a conversation can be super impactful.
Yes, absolutely.
I think of like just sitting at a table, sharing a meal together at work camp can be so impactful. Just sharing, and that's the thing though, is you got to create those moments though. You got to create the conversation. You got to engage in those things. You don't have to observe something incredible, right? In order to do something like that.
Yeah, you have to be present in those moments though,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I could be sitting there at dinner when this great conversation is taking place and be looking at my phone or be thinking about what I need to do for work. It's actually taking a break from those things and engaging actively in that moment or in that situation with the child or with the group that you're with.
I think that's one of the greatest relational hacks is just put your phone in your pocket.
Oh my goodness, yes.
That's it. Put it on silent. The do not disturbs, the limitations, all of that is so helpful. Notifications. I mean, it is truly a life hack, but certainly a relationship hack too, because I would imagine that's true for your spouses. I would imagine that's true for your coworkers, right? So it's definitely true for your kids too.
Yes. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And I think, like Melanie and we're talking about giving these opportunities, creating opportunities for something to happen, but not trying to script it in our head as the end result. Because as parents, we fall into that, or even as youth directors, right? Work camp, I want them to have this great, amazing experience. Well, maybe it's not going to happen with the person that they served per se, but maybe they connected with someone in their group from a different church. Maybe this connection happened in a different space. So not to set ourselves up for a letdown, rather just allowed to be organic.
And that's what I appreciate about Chris and Melissa's approach, right? And I would imagine, just harkening back to last season, for us people-oriented people, this is great news, right? But for task-oriented people, like that's a little harder because you can't plan for that moment.
Yeah, you can't schedule it.
Yeah. Exactly. It's kind of like it's funny when I don't know why, but recently I've gotten in a lot of conversations about what my favorite subjects in school were.
Oh, okay.
Right. And I'm the weird one that was like English because I like stories, and then math. But not science, not history. Because science and history are both like learn the details, learn the facts. This is exactly what the answer is. Blah 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 blah. And I couldn't handle it. Like it's very note cards, like very memorize certain facts.
We're so opposite.
Whereas math, like I'm like, okay, give me a formula.
Yeah.
And we get to use this formula in a lot of different ways and like a lot of different things. We get to find an answer and it's creative and it's all these things. And I think that's true for what we're talking about, right? And going to a task.
Concrete.
I was going to say math being creative is a new thought. I understand what you're saying.
I
know.
But I think that goes back to the original point.
What I mean by that is there's something new to it. There's
like,
something new every time you do a problem because it's not the same problem as last time. It's not the same fact. It's
okay.
I thought math was beautiful.
So I'm glad.
That's for you, Sandy Hampton. I'm right there with
I find
you.
science and
Terry
history
Rommel.
beautiful.
Yeah, math is so fun. I loved it. Yeah, I got a great joy, but I was a weird kid, right? But it goes to these situations, right? Thinking of it in terms of math. There's tools in your tool belt. That you have that like sometimes you need to use this one, sometimes you need to use this one. But like every situation is new and unique and is not going to be exactly what you planned, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard, but at least game planning, prepping, knowing that's going to happen can be very helpful in connecting.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what he was saying. You've got to create opportunities, right, for these connections to take place, and then you've got to be open and ready for them when they just pop up.
Exactly.
And you've got to be willing to engage in them.
That's true, because like toward the end, right, he's going to say one of his big pieces of advice is don't wait for someday to get here. That day is today. Like set aside a time each week for the possibility of connection to happen, right? Right. And again, don't force the connection. Because as we talked about, like car rides, trips, just conversations around a dinner table can be incredible opportunities. So things you're already doing because you're eating food, your kids are eating food, you're most likely not at your house 24/7.
You're the Uber driver.
Right.
And the same thing is true in faith life, right? And he's going to get into that too. So,
and that goes back to, looking at Jesus' stories.
Yes.
How he was very much allowing the experiences of each day to build connection. He didn't go out of his way to find someone to make that connection.
Yeah.
It was just part of what he was doing.
And at the same time, he had this beautiful way of making plans too. So
today we're going.
It is that balance. I mean, I think to the upper room, right? The even Palm Sunday, right? The triumphal entry. Like Jesus knew exactly where they were going to go and get a donkey. Then he knew exactly where he was going to do an upper room because he would have gone ahead of time. It's not just that he would have been able to know, I'll go and it's going to be okay, right? He would have made those preparations, and somehow he made all those preparations without anybody noticing, right? And those plans. And so when it came time, it's like, yep, you're going to go over here. You're going to see a man with a donkey, and you're going to say the teacher needs it. And the same thing with the upper room. And what do you know? It all worked out just fine.
Yeah.
All right, so when it comes to this connection, this CARE acronym, we start with C is for compassion, all right? And I love the kind of definition, at least I wrote down like my own like translations of these definitions, so correct me if I'm wrong. But like compassion is loving your kids in spite of their bad days or in spite of their mistakes type thing, because they don't deserve it, right? Those are the big things that kind of stood out to me, and what he said there was compassion is kind of like grace, and it's the love that's not deserved. Because I appreciate how it says grace-based, not merit-based. You don't earn my compassion, you have it, right? And I'm going to communicate that every second of every single day.
Yeah.
What else stood out to you guys when you thought about having compassion and what that looks like for parents?
I thought he was really, when he talked about how it's so hard sometimes to show compassion to our own children.
Oh my goodness.
It's easier for me to show it to someone that's outside of my house
Sure.
or someone in my classroom or a child in my ministry than sometimes it is to show compassion to my own child.
That hits home, but it's so true. I find myself, maybe it's like I feel like the stakes are higher, or the reflection on me. I don't know what it always is.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Now, I haven't been my own child, but I was a camp director. My little brother worked for camp, and after that first summer, I remember he and I were not necessarily on the best, because his perspective was, you are taking everything so much harder on me than you are everyone else. And in reflection, yeah, absolutely, because I felt like he's a reflection of me. I can't be seen as taking it easier on him. And if he messes up, then what does that say? And all the things like that. And I would imagine it's the same for the kids. Now, here's the thing, folks. Your kids are little versions of you.
Yep.
So they're going to make mistakes just like you did. And so part of it is asking, okay, I have made these mistakes before. What would I have needed in this situation?
Right. Yeah. When I think about compassion, I love the definition that it's whatever compassion is, it moves you to action on behalf of the other person. So sometimes we think about compassion and we like try to equate it to pity, like, oh, I feel bad for you. No, it's such a care that it motivates a loving action toward that person. And so for my kids, compassion needs to be the guiding factor, not necessarily correction, right? It needs to be compassion. And I love that we see that in Jesus, that he that's his filter when he looks at people. He doesn't look at the woman who committed adultery and act out of fear and anger, like, you're messing up your life and you're making me look bad. No, he has compassion for what is about to be happening to her and the trouble that she's gotten herself into, and the fact that, he cares for her well-being both now and in the future, and that moves him to a loving action for her rather than one out of fear.
Yeah.
I think for me, when you think about the word compassion, it ties with the previous chapter when he talks about empathy in the time, because I think there's a nuance between the two. And something I think as dads and fathers, that's something that I've recognized within myself when it comes to compassion, because of how I see others maybe with more compassion than my own kids. Early on, I made the decision not to be a coach to my own kids.
Sure, yeah. Oh, I think about that. I feel like that would be so difficult.
Absolutely, because it's already a very challenging environment for them, and I want them to know that dad's dad first before dad's coach, because I think, and I've seen some dads do amazing job coaching their kids.
So absolutely.
It can be done.
But knowing me and my personality, I thought the best thing for me to do is to be the dad on the sidelines who's cheering them on, than the dad who has to, in a critical moment, have to decide, how do I handle this as a coach and a dad? And so I think if you're a mom and you're coaching in the same capacity, or you're a mom and educator for your kids, that's the other thing is I was intentional not to teach my kids, except for faith. When it came to theology, I was fine with that. But other things, I was like, I really want you to have a different perspective, a different teaching than just your father. I want you to have that.
No, that's such an interesting dynamic to think about. Like, because it is like, I mean, I think just even just being a coach of not my children, like you carry so much of weight with you in every decision that you make. Like, so when you choose to coach a game, and that at varsity level, JV, everybody plays, but varsity level, like sometimes the kid's not going to get in the game.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things of like, what is it my kids value at home going to feel if I don't make the decision to put him in the game, or if I put him in the game and he shouldn't be in the game, am I going to get judged? Like all these other things too.
And again, it's not a can't be done, shouldn't do it, but it is this is a consideration, for the relationship of you and your child, and something worth thinking about. Just as your sideline coaching is something that that needs to be considered and thought about and weighed, because again, what input, what compassion,
and what are they hearing?
What are they hearing from you? What are they taking away as their identity and value? And
this is an interesting conversation I didn't know we were going to have, but like, when it comes to, okay, maybe you're not your kid's teacher or your kid's coach,
right?
But how do you talk about academics? How do you talk about athletics? And what kind of compassion do you have in those situations? Because it's one of those things of, yes, we all want our kids to succeed. Yes, we all want our kids to pass and get good grades. But like, are you having the conversation that is only communicating expectations?
Right.
Or are you communicating the need for hard work and the need for trying again and the need for resilience and working at something?
Well, and whether you are their coach or their teacher at any point or not, they're going to have all of those voices all the time of expectations. You get to be the voice of unconditional love.
Yeah.
Amen.
No one else but Jesus is going to be that voice for them. And so, we think we have to be all these voices to our kids because we assume wrongly that they're not going to hear it from the rest of the world. They're going to have plenty of expectations from the rest of the world. But what they absolutely need more than anything is compassion, unconditional love, and value.
Even when they're not perfect at this sport, this thing you're doing, or their grades are slipping, or something is happening, that we love you anyway.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not where your identity is found. Your identity is not found in your being in the starting rotation or whatever it is. That's not where your identity is found. And that's not where your love coming from me is found. Right. I love you no matter what.
Exactly.
You're not failing
Jesus
me.
loves you no matter what, right?
Yeah,
I mean, coming back to that, I tend to not have that compassion for my kids. Well, then I feel guilty and I feel horrible. So what do I do about it? Well, I've got to go to God and say, okay, I need your help. Forgive me. And guess what? He does.
Yeah.
And then, that I need to be the same person for my kid, because they're going to mess up. They're not going to make the grades. They're going to do things that are blatantly wrong, but I love you anyway.
Yeah.
Right. And I think we have to be careful too that we don't give unwarranted advice. And what I mean by that is
unsolicited,
right?
Unasked for,
because I think that then can shut down some communication doors, if not carefully managed.
Sure.
Meaning that we want to make sure, and I will use my kids, I don't tell them anything about something athletic or academic unless they ask and say, Dad, what do you think?
Yeah.
Or
till then,
asking them the question, hey, can I offer something? And if they say no, accept the no.
And
that's a hard one for me. But having to learn that it's okay.
How many times have you heard like a spouse, like great spouse relationship, it becomes what would you like me to do with this that you're sharing with me?
Are you,
that's the question.
Would you like some advice, or are you just venting? What do you need from me?
Do you need me to do anything in response to this? Yeah. Because your natural drive is to want to fix. Your natural drive is to want to do something, is offer advice, say the right thing. But a lot of times, as we've said over and over on this podcast, it's about just listening most of the time. Yeah. Again, it goes all relationships, especially true of kids. And for those coaches and teachers that are listening, we do hope that you also exercise the same kind of compassion. Because I know for me, like coaching those boys, they define themselves by their success and their mistakes.
Absolutely.
1000%. And I, like multiple times, I say multiple, like easily 50 times a season, I have to tell each boy, I'm not defining you by a mistake.
Yeah.
I'm like, I love you just the same. Just because I love you doesn't mean you're going to do this, doesn't mean you're going to do this, doesn't mean you're going to do this. Like, and I'm not pulling you out of a game over one mistake, because guess what? Everybody's going to make mistakes all the time.
Yep.
And it's a good life lesson, and I'll bring in that life lesson piece. So it's just good for teachers and coaches that are Christian to be able to bring that same mentality into being able to compete and hold people to a higher standard and all this other stuff. I mean,
and I think with that, it kind of bleeds into the next one, which is authenticity.
Good.
Because I think it has to come in play when you think about compassion. There's got to be a certain level of authenticity.
My translation of the authenticity, I did appreciate at least this quote. It doesn't mean that you tell everything.
Exactly.
It means that you're real about everything.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're not shy. You're not sugarcoating. You're not holding back. You're not all these other things. And it had 3 really great like pieces of advice. Put away the false narratives. Again, that somehow your kid's perfect. Like they know they're not perfect. You know they're not perfect. Why would you tell them they're perfect?
Yeah.
And then and also be real when it's bad. You know what I mean? Like like when something isn't good, it's okay to say it. You don't have to sugarcoat it. Apologize, because you're going to make mistakes, because you're a human. And then if you're going to want to raise your kid in the faith, if you want them to connect with God, you have to do it too. Yes. Like the whole idea of you can't just, and I love the illustration of the Pharisees in this section, right? Like Chris did a great job of pointing out that Jesus's beef with the Pharisees was not what they were saying.
Right.
It was what they were doing.
Yeah.
That what they were saying did not match what they were doing. Yep. They were hypocritical. And we've got to watch ourselves in that. Like, and to be authentic is that your talk is matching your walk.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The same standards you're putting in front of your kids or over your kids are the same standards you measure yourself with.
Yeah. I love the examples he gave of, I mess up too, right? So hold yourself accountable as parents, right? Yep. Because you're being inconsistent. You're saying one thing, and kids observe us. And they're quick to point out. I mean,
my goodness, especially those reds.
Really quick to point out, hey, Dad, you messed up. And our response is try to be defensive. And then guess what? They're going to be defensive. So if we come from this space of saying, yeah, I'm going to own it. This is my fault. Then you allow them to also experience that when they mess up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I dealt with that a little bit this week of, trying to make a point with one of my children and just saying like, this is what this behavior is causing. And it's hard for the people around you. And, my child just kind of got a little mad and defensive and was like, well, I think you do it too. And I said, you're right. And I struggle with it. It is not always easy, and I said, so I appreciate when I get reminders because it's something that I still have to work on, and my attitude is not always the best. I said, so you're right. And we're working on it together. Can I help you and you help me? And that piece of authenticity and like owning it and not feeling like I have to be the perfect one in order to be a good leader to my child. No, I need to be the real one so that my child learns how. Makes me think about like when people never see healthy conflict.
Yes.
Yeah.
And grow up never seeing anybody fight or disagree or argue or apologize or any of those things. And then they get out in the world and they're like, whoa.
Because there's conflict. Real life has conflict. And if you've never witnessed it, if you've never particularly seen how to do it healthily.
Then it's paralyzing because, you have no, it seems like it's so big. But if your parents are modeling, you as parents are modeling imperfection and continuing to try and apologizing frequently And, like all of that humility, like seeing that happen is a gift you're giving your child. It really is.
And I love that he says they're going to see through the, the smoke screen anyway. Yes. I may try to pretend like I'm perfect to my children. They know better.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're watching, they're seeing. Which and so being real with them
at some point they figure that out. Because it is funny, like when I talk to junior high in particular, and you're like, you do know your parents aren't perfect. Because a lot of times it comes from this perspective. The kid doesn't want to say anything because they're like, I made a big mistake. And I'm like, crazy thing. Your parents are human beings who have made big mistakes. And they're like, what? Like, because there is that. And that's why I'm bringing this whole thing out. At the end of the day, authentic is imperfection. Because there's no such thing as perfection in this world. As much as we all want to pretend. But I think that pursuit of perfection is what destroys so many things.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I think I watch it particularly destroy our young people, like our 7th to 12th graders. And that's why it's hard for them in church a lot of times, because like, and I'm not saying our congregation, but over the years, you hear that from people that are burnt out from church, and these expectations, or the young mom that had a crying baby that got like looked at very sternly, and you shouldn't be here and you shouldn't be sitting here, or the kids are too loud, like that kind of a thing. And it's like, we're all just trying to figure this stuff out as we go. And we're not trying to be disrespectful or disruptive or things like that. Or I don't know. I just, over the years, I appreciate, there's this show, I brought it up recently, The Good Place. Have you heard of this one? Not necessarily a family one, but I loved the premise of the show, which ultimately questions whether or not there is such a thing as a good person. That's the whole narrative that it has in the one season that it had. But I thought it was really well done, because it's basically saying you can have all the rules you want to, but you're never going to find a perfect person. It's just not going to happen. And for us to model that for our kids, to be authentic about our own imperfections, is a good thing for them to witness.
It's oddly freeing. Because it's an opportunity for you to talk about the bigness of God's grace toward you, that despite your brokenness, your imperfections, he still loves you, and that showing them that's the gift. That's what we want our kids to see.
I actually had a moment at work camp last year where I got a call from a former student, and they're struggling hard, and like new environment, new things, all like that's what happens in life, crazy. And typical piece of advice is like, okay, is there someone you respect or work with that maybe you could talk to in person? I love this conversation, but just adding little things. And the student shared, I did that. And this role model, this professional kind of said something like, what are you talking about? Like very much judged
dismissive
the student for even, what do you mean? Why would I struggle with that? Blah, 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 blah. Like complete facade. And I was like, okay, well, they're a robot, right? That's kind of what I said.
Wow.
I was like, I promise you'll find the people that are actually doing it, because for whatever reason, and especially I think this is true of the world, right? And maybe that's why parents have the pressure, is at work, you feel like you have to be perfect. At work, you have to do everything right. At work, right? There's a different level of judgment that we can see in a work situation, knowing job benefits, all this stuff are on the line, that somehow we have to be absolutely perfect. And at least for Christians out in the workforce, I hope we're modeling grace and not,
I want to talk about relevance.
Relevance for sure.
Yeah, because I like how he kind of kicks it off saying like, the word relevant has this kind of bad rap of being, popular, trendy, what's hip right now. That's not what we're talking about here. So what are we talking about?
My Hove translation was connect truth in a way that helps them understand and apply it. So, and it goes back to the whole perfection thing. Like your kid knows you're not perfect, or at least at one point they will. And so the more that you line up with truth and actually help them to see that and see you navigate truth, that's relevant. That's actually, so authentic and relevance, I think, go kind of hand in hand for sure. At the very least, partner really well together.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think part of that is also recognizing you as the parent to model these behaviors of confessions, right? Of acknowledging that you've done wrong, and how you find peace and how you find grace and forgiveness in your relationship with Jesus. to be able to model that to your kiddos, because then they see that that's where the source is for them too, the source of grace and mercy.
Useful.
Yeah.
Like relevant is useful. So it's not just like telling me about it intellectually. It's showing me how it matters and what to do with it.
Yeah, and the stuff that we talk about and we learn on Sunday morning and that we learn in our Bible study or we learn, from God's word, we can actually apply that in our lives, and letting them see you not just say it, but do it.
But live it.
It's kind of the like, so what question,
right?
Like, okay, Adam and Eve, so what? Well, here's how it applies, and here's how it's, it matters to you today, tomorrow. So that this is a thing that I think when we teach about religion or we teach about the Bible, a piece that can easily get missed is we miss it sometimes sitting in the pew like, oh, that's cool. I never learned that fact about this particular thing. But what does it mean? So what? And I think that relevance is the answer to that question. So what does it mean for me? How do I use it? What difference does it make?
Yeah, he showed us, I like that he used the example of the Pharisees, right?
Yeah.
So the Pharisees knew the information. And Jesus never said that the things that they said were wrong. In fact, Jesus said, hey, listen to what they're saying. His problem with the Pharisees were they've got all this knowledge, but they're not applying it. They're not living it out. They're not living their lives according to that teaching. Yeah. And to make the gospel relevant, to make, that God's word, that our identity is found in him, relevant, is we need to be living that out and showing it for our children.
Absolutely.
Instead of having this idea, which I've heard, I think, over my time in my Christian walk, is, do what I say, but don't do what I do, kind of thing, right? And it's like, no, you want to be able to actually, you allow your actions to speak louder than your words.
And look at culture and the world around us. What's their biggest complaint about Christians is we're hypocrites.
Yeah.
Sure.
We're like the Pharisees. We're
holding people to a standard that
we don't do it.
Yeah.
Yep. Which, like, one of my favorite quotes is always the whole, some people say the church is full of hypocrites, but I got to disagree. I think we got plenty of room.
Oh, yeah.
Because it goes back to that authenticness of
being real.
We're not perfect. Like, we all struggle with that and what that means. And but we're pursuing this. We're pursuing something greater.
Yeah.
Something better.
Right.
But that call to have to practice it yourself, to apologize when you're wrong, to don't do wrong things if they're wrong, right?
And when they point it out, acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Yep, you're right. I do that.
And acknowledge
absolutely
the need
do.
for
Guess
Jesus.
what? I still need God's help too.
I will always remember this bit from a Christian comedian years ago, and he was talking about taking kids to church, driving them to church, and he's like, just at his wit's end, he's like, what am I teaching them about Jesus? When I'm, get in the car, we are going to church. And we don't yell at each other in this family. And stop hitting your brother. And he's swiping at him in the back of the car, And it's like, it's so true. I find myself like, why are you speaking so meanly to your brother? And it's, oh my goodness. If I could just pause and look in the mirror and, whoa, man, my anger made me, speak poorly to you about speaking poorly to your brother. Oh my goodness. We all need some help, don't we? Let's take a big, deep breath and let's pray to Jesus for help. Like that, relevance of in the moment, and not just, I have an excuse to be angry about what you did. That's not, that's not, that might be an authentic, but it's not relevant, right? They're not going to learn anything and take anything from that and apply anything from that.
And,
they're,
bringing God back into the situation, right? Not just kind of, because maybe we're thinking, this applies however scripturally but actually verbalizing that to your child.
Yeah.
That, in this moment, you know what? We need a little Jesus right now.
Sure.
Let's stop and pray.
Yeah.
Let's ask him, you know what? I just messed up too. Let's stop and talk to God for a minute. Or,
At the end of the day, like the illustration that kids that's always used for kids is sponges, right? They're soaking in everything. And like particularly the younger the kids are, the more it's important to realize the water they're soaking in is you. Like as much as they like get in trouble at school and they're like, your instant reaction is like, well, where did that come from? What kids are they hanging out with? And I'm like, probably was you. Like just statistically speaking, the amount of time you're spending with them versus the time everybody else is.
As a teacher, you have a conference with a parent and they walk in and start talking. You're like, apple tree. Okay.
Yes, exactly. Apple and tree. Yeah.
I mean,
yes,
always
so true.
So it's one of those, like, again, as much as you want them to just listen to what you say, they're really going to follow what you do.
Oh, yeah.
Right. That's it. I mean, they're gonna be little mini yous, because it's so funny. Like when you get because in student ministry all the time, you see junior hires and high schoolers. You don't necessarily always get to meet parents, but then when you see the whole family come together for Christmas, or you see the whole family come for Easter,
confirmation church, and I'm like, whoa,
yeah. Or you see like a kid on a trip and you've known their parents for a while, and you're like, okay, all right, I'm seeing how they're just mini versions of their parents through and through. Yeah. And that they they would literally say things certain ways and do things certain ways. And that's the thing, is they'll think things certain ways too.
Yes.
Their actions will be guided by what they've witnessed from their parents, 100%.
And the reality is we all exhibit what we experience, right?
Yeah.
And they experience you more than any, like Melanie is saying, and they're experiencing your world that you've created for them. The safety of home and all that stuff. And so whatever that is happening at home is what then gets to be shown in the public. And so all of those things are moments for relevancy.
Yeah. But I think it's not because sitting and listening to this, I'm like, oh man, as a parent, and I'm listening to this, I'm like, man, that is a whole lot of pressure, and I have really messed my kids up. But I think there's this acknowledgement that, guess what? We've all messed up.
Yeah.
We've all fallen short.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so bringing that back into just acknowledging constantly with your kids, hey, we're a big mess. Our family may be messy, but let's, we're going to work on this together. We're moving through this together. And knowing that, because I thought, as I said that, apple tree, some parents probably going, she's talking about me. It's okay. I mean, we are all there. No, it's me too.
Yeah.
I mean, we are all there together,
Exactly.
But making it relevant to your child that, guess what? We are a big mess, and we do need help, and we need God's help in the middle of this.
When you compare the two different ways of approaching this, one is I have to be right and perfect, and in order to have authority over my kid and teach them how to be right and good, versus I just need to be real when I mess up and show grace because I've received grace, and keep apologizing and keep trying and leaning into what Jesus has for me. Like, which one is easier?
Oh, yeah.
Like, because we've all tried the being right and upholding authority and making sure, trying to keep our kids in line so they don't make the same mistakes we did. We've tried that. That's hard. That's heavy.
Yeah.
The lighter load really is. And it doesn't work.
Highly ineffective.
Really doesn't work. Because, like we said before, our kids see right through it. The lighter load is moving together with our kids and acknowledging when we make mistakes. And every time, oh man, I'm sorry. Oh man, I need Jesus' help. Every day I need Jesus' help. I am not perfect. Neither are you. And you know what? Jesus loves us both. Like, that's the lesson that we ultimately want to teach our kids. We don't want to put the pressure of works righteousness and perfectionism on them. Like, that's not what they need. They need Jesus. Right. Let's teach them how to lean on him.
And the world is giving them lots of opportunities to push in that you've got to be perfect and you've got to do everything right. And I think for us as parents too, So we've got to hold on to that truth. That
the illustration of social media is a great one for it, right? I mean, how many pictures does someone take to get to the one they actually post? Like, especially on a professional level. Like, I remember very vividly, I don't know which celebrity it was, but like there was some photo shoot where she was looking like a goddess or something like that, like just very beautiful, and the final photo looked fantastic, but then it had like the video of the photo shoot, and it was like embarrassing in a little bit, like, and completely awkward, unreal and awkward and all these other things. But to get the one photo, like, oh my goodness, I need to look like that. Like, okay, well, you probably look like that. Just this is what it looks like. It's actually awkward. Like, so you could use technology.
Staged.
Yeah. Well, in stage and like. And again, comedic in like the craziest
ways.
ways.
To get to that one half second of a moment where you look okay.
Yeah. All right. So we've got compassion, we got authenticity, we've got relevance,
engagement.
And all of these are with Jesus, right? Mm-hmm. That's where we're going to see them, is when we look to Jesus and see how he's compassionate, how he's authentic, how he's relevant, like just letting truth be what truth is. And the final one, engagement. Mm-hmm. And I do appreciate, like, again, I don't know how much of this lined up with the book or not, but it's where you aim to be actively connecting rather than that being in the same proximity, that passive engagement, like where we kind of started the conversation. And the ultimate goal of this section was simply saying, you need to do this. It's not a secret. Just pick something and do it. Like that was my interpretation of what Chris was saying.
Yeah. And it just, we hearken back so often to other books and other things that we've learned. But, I think about the picture of a table, and how a table with conversation and nothing else on it is an interrogation, but a table with food, is conversation. A table with a game is conversation. So, engagement, you set something out, you do something, you put something there, whether it is we're going to play a board game, or we're going to go get ice cream, or we're driving in the car on the way to something, anything that prevents it from being, okay, Jan, tell me about your day.
Right.
Okay? And who did you say, and then that pressure, similar to when you're creating a fun time to connect, or, planning the Disney vacation, whatever it is, you can push too hard. So engagement, something to do with the other person. And that's where you kind of get the opportunity to sprinkle in these bits of, hey, if you could be any animal, what would you want to be? I don't know, whatever.
But just being present in that moment too.
Yeah.
Not, I think as parents, we've got so many things that we're worried about. Maybe we've got the house note coming up. Maybe we've got, our kids are in 5 different things, or my kid's in college and how is she doing? Or,
the chores.
Just thinking about all the things that parents have to do. And it's easy for us to get distracted.
Yeah.
And to not be present in that moment, and realizing it doesn't have to be a big, huge thing. It can be sitting around a table having a meal. It can be sitting around the table playing a game. It can be riding in your car, but you're actually present and listening to your kid.
Yeah.
Right? Going kind of where they're taking you.
Exactly.
Sometimes as my children have gotten older, sometimes it's, hey, can you put your phone away for a few minutes? And not necessarily that I'm starting a conversation, but their phone's away. Hey, guess what happens when their phone's away? They get bored and they talk to me.
Right? Yeah.
Or we sing a song together, or we, find something that we enjoy together.
Well, and you can invite the kids into all those things too.
Yeah.
Like, do these things with me. Help me make dinner. Help me all this other stuff. Like, and I know I loved that stuff as a kid. You better believe it. But that's because I'm wired to like we talked about primal questions. Like, I just want to help. I just want to contribute. So I love that opportunity.
And I'm always surprised by that, and it does go back to some of those reminders, like, is it better to get your house vacuumed the right way? Or today, is it better for you to let your 2-year-old help you because they're excited to help you?
Yes.
And it takes 20 minutes longer. Fine, whatever, or,
yes.
Is it better to connect over doing the dishes and maybe run the dishwasher twice? Or, what is it? What's more valuable? And sometimes that investment of connecting while doing something and letting the details go is such a blessing, because there's so many layers to it, for them as much as for your relationship to them.
I think one area that I really saw this kind of engagement play out recently is in my ministry, and it's for more with the older kiddos. When you think about having conversations with them, I think a yacht club is a great example where
You're gonna have to break down that for our listeners.
So
yacht club, don't know what yacht club is.
So yacht club is basically an experience that we do in student ministry, where we invite students to come without any agenda, so to speak, and they come to a designated place on campus where they have snacks and drinks provided, and there isn't any set time for them to come or leave, but they come and just
hang out.
Yeah.
And the beauty of that is it's 3 hours, and they will talk for 3-4 hours.
And then go in the parking lot after and stay for longer.
Right. Because again, all you're doing is just allowing them to have safety.
The space,
and a space.
Yeah.
And then you see conversation, and you don't even have to ask to put the phone down because the phone is down because they're engaging in actual conversation. And I think in a way, I'm like, man, that would be cool as parents if we can replicate that in our homes. And so we do. We tell our son, hey, invite your friends.
Yeah.
Let them come over. And they spend 90% of the time playing Mario Kart, or they were having a great conversation. And I'm just around. And when they lean into, hey, so Uma, what do you think? Then you're like, let's go.
Yes, I'm here.
Let's get after this, right? And then you can get all excited, and you can see and watch your child along with other children and the influence they have on each other. And you as a parent can feel confident about your kiddos' circle of friends and circle of influence. And as a parent, it gives you, I think, confidence in just who are the
influences in their lives.
Yeah, who are my kids' peers. And,
exactly. And even with little kids, right? When you have the friends over, it's a great way for them to engage with you too in conversations.
Yeah.
Especially if they're an only child. They will talk to you. Yes,
they will. Yes.
They will talk to you. I invite those only children, and they tend to talk to me more than my kid.
Well, that's what, like, as you were talking and as you got in the yacht club stuff, I was thinking a somewhat similar vein because kind of where Chris wraps up the chapter is talking about the things to avoid. And it's the opposite of these four things. And the opposite of compassion is indifference.
Yes.
The opposite of authenticity is inauthenticity or unreliability. That's right. The opposite of relevance is irrelevance, and the opposite of engagement is disengagement. So when I see all those words together, indifference, unreliability, irrelevance, and disengagement, I ask myself the question, I say, how do we get there? How do we get to indifference? How do we get to unreliable? How do we get to irrelevant? How do we get to disengagement? And I came up with one word: busyness. And it's so interesting because of the conversation we've been in or at the start of this year about starting the year without hurry, and really a great book, Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. Because what I've noticed in my own life is, the to-do list is pretty heavy and pretty full all the time. But kind of, Uma, what you talked about with Yacht Club, there's somewhat of a just creating space and letting every moment be what every moment is, and letting the to-do list sometimes not be completed, that is kind of freeing.
My goodness.
Yeah. And because it allows you to be present for what matters most. And that's whatever relationships God has for you, especially the relationships though with your kids. Like saying to yourself, ultimately, what if I don't do the laundry today? What if I don't do the dishes today? What if I don't get this task done for work today? Right. And I think too, I feel like I walk a somewhat unique road being a pastor and walking alongside of people in heavier moments of life, and certainly at times at funerals and things like that. But it's one of those that has deepened my appreciation for, I don't have every day. I'm not promised tomorrow. And that whole car wreck thing a year ago kind of helped remind me of that too. But to just be in a moment, allow the moment to be slow, allow the people around you to be engaged with. And certainly set aside the time to try and truck out as much of the stuff as you possibly can, because you can do that too. You can.
But it is, again, I think it's so valuable as parents. We're busy, right? Some of us have full-time jobs, maybe 2 jobs. You're coming home, you're exhausted. What energy do you have left for your kids to be in engagement? And so you see the dirty dishes in the sink. You see, the towels that need to be picked up. You see all this stuff. And something that Tony and I really worked on. Okay, we're gonna be okay with the messy house. We're gonna be totally fine, because we want those precious 30 minutes, 40 minutes around the dinner table to be focused on our kids.
Well, but the other side is think about the places you go when you're stressed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Alone.
So your phone, the social media. I just for a while there, I would tell people I've had a very stressful day. I would just go watch some stupid comedy like that made no sense, that didn't activate my brain whatsoever. But like imagine, right? I would imagine once I have a family, that's not a really healthy thing to do, right? So instead of going to Netflix because it's easy to take your mind off of things, what if we turn off the screens and actually just engage with people around us, and embrace those moments while we have them, like that kind of a thing.
Right. And at the same time, I would say that if you are aware that you have a certain level of anxiety and stress buildup, like Tony and I figured out a way where she gets like, what do you call it? It starts with D. De-stress? No. maybe it's de-stressing, where she takes 30 minutes just to collect
Sure,
herself.
especially as an introvert.
Decompress. That's the word.
100%. Yeah.
Know yourself well, because you're not going to be a helpful parent if you are all wound up. So allow yourself to decompress, and that's where partnering and knowing who you are, it's super helpful, because then we can tag team and say, okay, hey, I got this. You go take care of you, and then come down, and then we can tag all.
And I'm thinking of
work together,
like spouse. That's a great relationship to do that. If you're a single parent,
right?
Find out who your partners are in helping with your kids. Like, so is it a neighbor? Is it a friend where hey, I'm really stressed, I need to be a better parent? Or is it like the whole hide in the bathroom or whatever?
Well, and I think sometimes it's okay to be real with your kids.
Oh, yeah.
And say, you know what?
Just gonna say
Mommy needs 5 minutes right now.
Exactly.
I am at the end of my rope.
Yeah.
And I need to breathe.
And that's authentic.
And it's okay to be authentic and to be real and to say, look,
and be relevant in the moment.
I need 5 minutes, and I'm going to go in my room, and I need you to sit right here and watch Wildcrats or whatever it is they're watching on TV.
Yep.
Give me 5 minutes. I need that for me. And to be real with your kids and let them know.
Because
and to say, I want to be present with you, and I want to be able to do this with you. Right now, I have to give my attention here. So once I'm done with that, then I'm coming,
it's the whole oxygen mask, right?
Yes.
Make sure you grab the mask first before you go take care of your kids.
And communicating that is totally okay.
Yes.
Totally okay.
I think back to when you did the Wednesday night class for colors.
Oh, yeah.
And a mom sharing, like, she had her son was a yellow.
Yeah.
Right. So wanted to spend every waking moment with his mom.
Talking and clinging and
she was not yellow. So it's the same idea. Like, she needed to be able to rest and debrief.
Yeah.
So especially like, we can't spend, I love you so much. And I love that you like to be around me, but I cannot, I need about 30 minutes to get back to full mommy mode.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And that's okay. I think
absolutely,
especially like in those single parent situations, just know that you have the grace. Please don't be afraid to lean in,
spousal situations. Be sure that you're being honest and saying, hey, I need 5 minutes in the garage or in whatever it is.
Go to the store.
I need it.
I think I've gotten to say this in the last several seasons, but there's a Bluey episode about it that's great.
Oh, there you go.
Great about it.
There you
go. I just need 20 minutes.
There you go.
I think I hope parents are hearing too that, you're human.
You're human.
Yes.
We
Please
got
recognize that. And in spite of all who you are, life's going to happen. God's walking with you. And if it means because of this, you're not going to have a home cooked meal. Instead, you're going to order in whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's
okay.
We'll have cereal.
Right. We're going to have a grilled cheese tonight. Grilled cheese is a great, easy meal.
My parents were always, breakfast for dinner, one.
We do that too.
Yes. That's a win.
And then it was Kraft mac and cheese and ham.
Yep.
Like that was
mac and cheese and hot dogs.
Broccoli. We'd always do the broccoli because it was the only vegetable all four of us would
Nobody
eat.
wants it but me. I like how he wraps it up and brings it back together. And he says one of the most challenging elements of parenting is all the stuff we want to say or wish we would do or plan to do someday.
Sure.
And then he says, okay, you got to decide that today is that day. Don't wait.
Yeah.
If there is something that you feel like is important, there's something that you want to say to your child, say it now.
Yep.
Because, we can keep putting off till tomorrow. Well, what's that country song? Tomorrow never comes, right?
Yeah.
If tomorrow never
there you go.
Yep.
I mean, it do it now.
Yeah.
After you've taken your break and given your brain time to process what it is.
Yeah.
It's okay. And make sure you're giving your kids that time too.
Yes. Ooh, I love that.
Know their rhythms. Yeah.
And their wiring.
Yeah.
Season 6.
There you go. All comes together.
Right. Well, yeah. So with that, I mean, what a wonderful conversation we've been able to have today, and that encouragement at the end to make someday today, and to say what needs to be said, do what needs to be done. See your kid today, look them in the face, talk to them, engage with them, be with them, have compassion, be authentic, be relevant, and engage with them. I mean, and look to Jesus when you need that reminder of what that is. So if you have enjoyed this episode at all, please share it with somebody. Put it out there. Certainly, whatever way that you are engaging with us today, share that encouragement with someone else, or just at the very least continue the conversation. Maybe you talk with your spouse, maybe you talk with your friends, maybe you talk with coaches and teachers and things like that. That glorifies everything that we're doing. So next time, chapter 5 is The Book is Better.
Always.
Teach
Always
them to
the book
read
is better.
the Bible. Teach them to read the Bible. So yeah, the book is better. Get to talk about what that means. So I'm excited. Chris and Melissa have done a great job so far. So I'm looking forward to what they have to say about my favorite book, y'all.
Nice.
All right. With that, again, thanks for joining us today, and we will see you next time.